Hi everyone, it's Richard and this is Educational Leadership class. In today's session, we are going to talk about the school as a social system. At the end of the session, you are expected to discuss the basic concepts of the school as a social system and how they impact individual learners, classroom, the school, and the larger community. We all know that schools are important organization that prepares our children for an adult role. Their working mechanism and the school has a strong effect on the quality of education we give. As an organization, it is characterized by an interdependence of its parts, clearly defined population differentiation from its environment, and a complex network of social relationships and its own culture. To better understand how these things works in the school organization, let's talk about the systems theory of organizations. Systems theory is the interdisciplinary study of systems. Systems are cohesive groups of interrelated, interdependent parts that can be human-made or natural. And there are many theories that try to explain the nature of the school organization. Among them, the social system theory has been one of the most realistic models for school. This theory inherits key concepts from its predecessors. And what are those predecessors? These are the rational system, natural system, and the open system. Let's have this one. Let's discuss the three one by one in order for us to really understand how social system works in the school. The rational system perspective views organization as machines built to achieve some desired ends, or we can call it as goals or outcomes. Within the rational systems, there are hierarchies of authority, division of labor, work specialization, rules, and regulations that the individuals inside the organization should follow. All of these are typically associated with this one, bureaucracy. Organizations are formed for the main purpose to accomplish one goal, and that goal specifies the outcomes to be achieved through organizational activities. Individuals within the organizations are assigned to a specific role that are independent of their personality, and I am referring to the job description. So, each of the person produces only one desired outcomes that are essential to working of the organization. This resembles to the so-called machine. Each part does its job in a linear fashion, just like a machine. When you feed it, it will follow this one particular linear motion. So, however, in this particular perspective, we cannot deny that human beings are not simple as parts of a machine. They cannot work as expected to be always like rational and to work like robots. And this comes the natural system. Diri mo insert ang assumption ni natural system. While the rational systems emphasize goals, natural systems propose that organizations, in fact, strive to survive and the goals are meaningful as long as they help the organization's survival. Therefore, the organization may modify or even remove the goal when necessary. We can remove the goal if ever that particular goal cannot contribute to the development of its people. Natural system emphasize the human side of the organizations, as they reject the dualism that splits the people and then the organization, because the organization cannot work without its people. It is an informal organization wherein individuals have to interact with each other to carry out the organization's goal, which means they learn each other's personal life, each other's habit, each other's behavior, each other's feelings, and etc. In that case, some people are liked and respected, while others are not. And there is now, in that particular activity, there is now a social behavior interaction between the people or the individual within the organization. But though in this arrangement, still rational system and natural system believes that the school is an independent from their external environment. And in that case, the open system came out. Open system was developed as reaction to former rational system and natural system that describes schools, as what I have said earlier, as independent of their external environment. Open systems are affected from outer forces, from outer environment, while being simultaneously dependent on them. Okay, so there is now the portion that the external environment can affect the internal organization. Open system argues that one cannot look at the individual organization in isolation. Organizations are intertwined with their environment to the extent that the organization and the environment boundary is indistinct. There is now the cooperation of whatever happened in the external environment. It could possibly affect the happening inside the organization. The main element that distinguishes the open system from the rest of the system is the transformational process you have here. Transformational process, it is the process by which the raw materials coming from inputs, okay, will be turned into products, or we can have that one as input. In an educational setting, for example, in a school, the inputs can be considered as pupils, okay, or the learners, one of the inputs. And then they will undergo this transformation process. For example, in college, you will have the 4 years or 5 years of transformation for you to produce graduates. Therefore, in the transformational process, the system continues to take sources from its environment, and transform them according to the environment's needs, which means that every learner, when it comes with the duration of time, will be molded according to the demands of the external environment. An important element of this interaction is called feedback. Feedback is the information about the quality of the process and lets the system to correct itself and enhance itself. And of course, feedback as well can be a source of our input. In that particular case, we can infer that the schools are dependent on its external sources by nature. In a simplistic sense, they need funds and children from outside of their boundaries. I'm referring from the external environment. Okay, by acknowledging these realities that the schools are also dependent on its external sources, just like whatever the demands from the external environment, Hoy and Miss Kale of 2005 assert that social systems are at the same time open system. Research also reveals that the connection within the school, that the connection between the rules and behaviors and among the structural units in school may not consist of solid lines. Okay, as you can see, for example, in our organizational charts that are mounted on the walls of the university, there are broken lines. That means that there are a little coordination, or there is this indirect coordination within the subsystems of the organization, and that situation is what we call as the loose coupling. Okay, in the open system, as you can see here, open system tend to be loosely coupled. Okay, as a result, in that particular case, teachers get freedom in their school activities. Okay, teachers can make use of their expertise if they are not disrupted by the administration. Okay, this is now the exercise of your academic freedom, all right? And then some researchers as well agrees that teachers should be given this academic freedom inside the classroom in order to maximize, to boost the students' various abilities, to showcase the students' ability with minimal yes, minimal supervision of the administration or of the higher ups. Okay? All right, and according to Hoy and Miskell of 2005, there are many assumptions of the school as a social system. They bring all the assumption and they incorporate that one to the educational setting. And these are the assumptions of the social systems. Social systems, they believe that these are open systems. Okay, so I have said earlier that when you say open system, this is how the open system should work. And then the open system is loosely coupled, or meaning there is this freedom, the academic freedom inside the school. And then they believe the social system consists of interdependent parts, which interact with each other and the environment. Individual in this interdependent parts should play its role in order to achieve what is this organizational goals or objectives. Okay, and then social systems are goal oriented, as what I have said, because social system is the anak, no, the result of the combination of rational, natural, and open system. Okay, because open system is the answer for our debate in the rational and the natural system. And fourth, social systems are people. There are people in the organization. There are people in each of the parts, and they are playing roles in order for to achieve the institutional or the organizational goals. Okay, social systems have structure, is what you said. Social system is really the anak, no, coming from rational, natural, and then open system, and there come there you have the social system. Okay, and then social systems are political. Okay, so we can say that the school is a social system, so we can also infer that the school is political, okay, in nature. And more or less, we have this the purpose of education, and the purpose of schooling is for political purposes. All right, so school systems have cultures, school cultures, and climate. And then schools have norms and social social systems have norms. Social systems are conceptual and relative, and all formal organizations are social systems, but not all social systems are organizations. Okay, because we can classify this one because we have to remember that we have this formal organizations and we have this informal organizations. So basically, these are the key assumptions to social system. Okay, and related to educational setting, this is how it looks like. Incorporating those in the educational setting, this is how it looks like. Again, Hoy and Miskel of 2005 visualized the elements of social systems, as what I have mentioned earlier. And their model, this is the model of the elements of the system, was taken from Getzel and Guba's model of 1957 about the model of the social systems. Just that when they incorporated this one to the educational setup, they added some subsystem to it. Okay, they added their own perspective of social system by blending the natural and then the rational system, and they inject four subsystems into the transformational process. So as what I have presented earlier, that the schematization of the open system, it started with the input, and then the input will undergo this transformational process, and then it will produce, of course, in the process, we have to consider our external environment and in order for us to produce this quality graduates. Now, incorporating the concepts of the subsystems, they inject that one to the transformational process, and more or less the four subsystems will be considered as well in transforming our learners or our inputs. So what are these internal elements of the system that they injected? The first one here is the structural system. Okay, we have here the structural system. The structural system is similar to those of the formal organizations or of the organizations. These are the bureaucratic expectations. Okay, rule organization's behavior. Okay, these are the roles that derive from those expectations are represented by the positions in the hierarchy. Okay, as what I have said earlier, in a formal organizations, we have this hierarchy of position. Okay, for example, in our case, in our organization, we have to start with the board of trustees, from president, and then chancellor, vice chancellors, academic, and then for administrative, and down to um, uh, in the in the academic setting, after the vice chancellor, we have now the deans, and then the deans, the chairperson, the faculty, and then the students. Okay, you can see that we're in the hierarchy of organizations on the walls of our classrooms. We have this one, the organizational structure of the university. All right, the hierarchy distribute the tasks to the specialized individuals, and the organization is the result of the division of labor. Okay, every position, every department, we have this corresponding role to play in order to achieve for the achievement of this organizational goal. The structure of the social system inherits many elements from rational, or natural, and then the open systems. For example, the social systems have both formal and informal organizations within them. Okay, and then the next one is what we call the cultural system. The cultural systems, these are the shared orientations. These are the shared emerging interaction from the individual within the system. Okay, as the individual interact, they share, of course, common belief, values, and habits to gain identity as the group. Okay, this is a natural outcome of the social system. Culture is most visible impact or aspect of the organizational life, and then this is being exhibited as the unwritten or the feeling that is set of the values, the norms, the belief of the organization. That is very common. For example, we have this different culture, different practices with this particular department, and then with this particular department as well. Though you are in one organization, but uh, though you are one organization, but in that particular organization, there are shelves or departments, and every department has this uh, attack their shared orientations, and more or less those shared orientations in every department constitute to your identity as an organization. Okay, and we can commonly call that one as our core values. Okay, and the next one here is the individual system. This is the cognition and motivation of every individual needs, and this is also talking about the social behavior. Okay, we all know that every individual inside this particular system has this different set of needs and belief that affect the behavior, and we should be considering all of those. Unlike organizational expectations, individual needs and expectations are flexible, and this should be adaptable to formal roles, and thus they provide a room for discretion in behavior. So individual system, it talks about the individual's behavior, individual needs that more or less will be considered in order for us to really to move, in order for us to um, to achieve the desired organizational goal. And the last one here is political system. We all know, as what I have said, as a purpose of schooling is really for political purpose. We all know that politics inevitably appear in the organization. Even a small-scale organization, there is politics. Okay, politics emerges from the interaction of authority and the power within the organizations. And there are three sources of powers in the organization. These are the formal power, which originates from the structural system, of course, from, for example, the bureaucratic expectation from the structural system. For example, you are in that particular position, of course, you have this power, and when you hold the position inside the organization, of course, that entails, okay, power and responsibility. And then the cultural system that produces informal power, and then the individual system as well that produces expertise, okay, or expert power, the power of expertise. Politics is the way of how some individuals use their influence for their interest. Okay, they often use their power at the backstage to profit their private interactions, their private agenda, their private affairs at the expense of the organization. So politics is not just in the government. Okay, this is also being observed in school, and more or less you have observed some of the exercise of politics inside the school organization. As long as you are in that particular position, so there is the corresponding privileges. Okay, for example, in public orientation, there is really politics because when the president is new, and then there will be a new set of heads as well that will be elected or that will be chosen in the private sector as well. Whoever assumes the position, and then there will be a replacement of its people in order for because of that. In that particular case, they are really exercising the politics inside the organization. Okay, and more or less these are the inserted elements in the system. And as a whole, this is the social system models for schools. So what I have said earlier, that we should be considering the input, and the input could be what are the environmental constraints, what are the human and capital resources. Of course, we have to consider that one. For example, in schools, how many do we need doctors, do we need teachers, additional teachers? We should be considering all of those because manpower is really important. And then the mission, and then the foreign policy. Okay, one of the inputs as well when it comes to teaching and learning process, if you have just learned in your principles of teaching and curriculum, we should be considering our VMG as well as our input, because more or less that can affect the graduates that we are going to produce at the end of 4 years or 5 years. And then we should be considering as well the materials and methods of finances, um, the people. We should be considering all of this as our input, and of course our students as a school, our learners, the population of our learners as well, because those inputs, if we consider those, it can really affect the entire process in the organization. Okay, and then here I have already discussed this one, and more or less the structural system can um, and the political system can affect a teaching political system as well, and the individual system as well can affect a teaching, because more or less when you have this, when you are a leader in the structural system, for example with chairperson or dean, and then with exercise politics, and more or less every individual in the system will be affected. There will be we can say that this particular person is being favored, or this particular person is given some task and the other one is not, so it can really affect the teaching and the individual system. Every motivation, no motivational aspect of every person inside the system, and then whatever your shared practices, whatever your shared orientation would always affect learning. Okay, and cultural system as well will always affected when mixed with a structural system would always affect learner. As you can see, everything in this system will be affected if ever there will be malpractices inside the system. It will really uh, radiate to everybody because everything here in the social system, everything in the system, sa pagkangan nga system siya, whatever the malfunction of this particular area, of this particular department, this particular place in the system, everything that comes after that will be affected as well. All right. So you can see here, and in this following process here, the internal process, we should be considering as well our external environment. Since school as a social system, as an open system, it is affected with the external factor. Just like for example, what happened today, we are adjusting, okay, our transformation process. For example, in our situation today, we have this COVID, and that COVID is an external environmental factor, and we are considering that one as one of our input, and that could be and that in that particular case, the COVID really affects the transformation process. There are changes in how the things, the core, no, of the of the school as a social system, which is the teaching and learning process that, okay, is really affected. So in that particular case, we are considering the external environmental factor so that we can produce a desired output. We can produce this achievement. We can produce a job satisfaction if ever our students can apply after they graduate. And then we can have this one, the absenteeism, and then the dropout rate. We can consider this as well. If you have a good input here, if you have the good transformation process, absenteeism can be avoided. If you have bad transformation process, if that is not really the process as expected, so there will be a lot of dropout rate, and then the overall quality will be affected. Okay, if ever the transformation process here is not that good, of course, what output you will produce, not so good output, sad pod. Okay, and then the overall quality, whether it is good or bad. Again, everything will be affected. The output is really affected in the internal process of the school. And then, if ever there will be discrepancy between the actual performance and then the expected performance, this is the actual performance of my graduates, they are expected to be like this as the graduate attributes, and then the expected performance kay ingon ani nyo mo ni ilang actual performance, there is a mismatch. So we have now to recheck. There is the evaluation to check the effectiveness of the processes that we have in the internal system. And that could be, we have to recheck the transformation process. Saan ako nagkamali? Ano yung, in what particular system tayo nagkamali? Alright? So we have to recheck our internal system. And of course, this discrepancy will serve as an input as well for the next rolling, no, for the next phase. Okay, if ever nga makita what are the discrepancies, those are our bases in order for us to enhance and to correct those discrepancy. And those the data coming from those could be one of our input. Okay, kaya parang makorrect na sad po diri si transformation of process in order for you to really achieve what are the laid down the goals, what are the expected na outcome nga mahitabo after this one. Okay, so again, I will repeat, the school as a social system has its following key parts. Of course, the structure, these are the roles of expectations of positions. This is already written in your job description. Okay, individual. These are the key unit. Without individual, there will be no organization. And every individual possesses this individual needs, belief, and cognitive understanding of the job. And more or less, they are expected to perform the job that they are expected to perform. Next is the culture and climate. Okay, the school culture and climate. School culture represents the unwritten feeling part of the organization. It is the shared values. And climate, school climate, this is talking about the visible part of the interaction between the staff and the faculty, the interaction between the people inside the organization. And politics, these are informal power relations that develops continuously. Okay, again, there is politics in school. Okay, naagyo na ginagmay nga mga politika na pamaagi sa eskwelahan. Next is the core. The core is the teaching learning process. It's a technical core of the school. The school is there to educate, to give education. To teaching TLA is the technical core for the school. And then we have here the environment. These are everything that outside of the organization, and more or less those are, as what I have said, those are the source of input. Kung example kanina, this COVID-19 as our external environmental factor, and more or less we considered that particular COVID-19, that particular pandemic, no, and then we consider this as input. And with that fact, we have this pandemic, our transformation process has been changed. Of course, the teaching and learning approaches and methodology has been changed in order to respond to this particular environmental factor, which is the pandemic. Next is the output, the product of the organization, educated students. And more or less, the product, we can evaluate that one kung sakto ba gyud atong na if we really created, if we really produce the desired, the expected outcome. Okay, when it comes to evaluate, that's why evaluation, no? Feedback. Okay, that's why feedback is really important, because this is to check. Feedback is really important because this is to really check whether our output is okay or not. Okay, that's why we have to consider feedback as well to recheck our internal system, and the feedback as well as serve as our data, as our input in order for us to correct na pud ay mao ni ang feedback nila. So ako ni siyang i-consider nga my next input for me to correct the transformation process, the next phase. Okay, and then the effectiveness, the congruence between the expected and then the actual outcomes. Okay, there will be comparison, and we can check that one through evaluation. So evaluation of the organization. Okay, that's why we submitted ourselves, no, to different organization that would check and balances the school's processes, okay, internal processes of the school, whether we are on track, whether we are not on track. That's why we have that one to check effectiveness of our processes in the school. So again, these are the things that we have to learn in order for us to understand how the school as a social system works. You become a teacher soon or an administrator, so you already know, you have this background information and how these things in school should work. Okay, that's all for today, and I hope you learned something. See you next time.